Happening today, the Nikkei 225 is hovering at a 5.5-week high as Olympics-related plays continue to march higher. Kaori and Joji has been tracking all of the top movers out of Tokyo. Kaori?
Yeah, Shinzo Abe's got everything. I mean, he just swooped in at the last minute and took credit for this bid that has been going on for years and years. But, you know, as far as the market is concerned, we're seeing continued gains today. Market's up 1% for the Nikkei. The Topix is up by some percentage margin as well. Real estate stocks, construction stocks, shipping stocks, pretty much higher across the board. Some of them very sharply, double-digit percentage gains for Taisei yet again. The property sector, as you can see, also moving higher, some of the railway stocks as well. So I don't know how much of a dampener the data later on today from China can put on this market. You know, despite the fact that we haven't really got a whole lot of detail on the third arrow, there seems to be a lot of momentum surrounding many of these companies. The CapEx component, of course, and the revisions to the GDP were also encouraging as well. So net-net, we're seeing continued gains in the Tokyo equity market, despite the fact that we continue to fail around the 100 yen mark for dollar yen. Dollar yen currently trading at 99.54. But we're seeing continued upward momentum in many of the big blue chip stocks, manufacturing space in particular. So all in all, another good day, strong day for Tokyo equities, Chloe.
Yeah, Kaori, it's probably worthwhile getting some great calls on the equity markets to see whether this momentum can continue. Glen Wood joins us, head of sales global at Mitsubishi UFJ Morgan Stanley Securities. Glen, are you with us? Yeah, there you go. So, Glen, all of a sudden, it seems like we didn't get any concrete details about what's going to happen to the third arrow, but somehow the answers are all out there. People start thinking that the Olympics win will somehow certainly add more fuel to the fire as far as Abenomics impact is going to happen. So how are you approaching the Japanese equity markets, and what should investors, which sectors and which stocks should they be getting into now?
Hi, Chloe. It's good to see you again. Good to be back. The Olympics, historically, is incredibly important for Japan, psychologically, sentimentally. If you look back to the 1964 Olympics, the 1964 Olympics happened just 20 years after the end of the war, which was monumental for Japan, and it really represented Japan's reemergence to the global market, reemergence to economics, reemergence to international trade. We had the likes of the first trans-Pacific cable laid. We had the first Olympics that was televised, and we had the Shinkansen, the bullet train that was released, as well as the road systems around Tokyo that were built. So for the average Japanese person, to get these Olympics coming in 2020 is absolutely phenomenal, and it's very, very psychologically and sentimentally important. I think we'll see a lot of movement around not only investments in things like stocks that are going up already, whether it's construction or real estate or infrastructure, but this is exactly what Abe needed, as well, as Kaori said earlier, and it provides just more momentum to the economy and the stock market.
Glen, I understand the whole feel-good factor, and it's amazing that people can have a nostalgia for an era that they didn't really even know back then. But when you take a look, forget the Olympics for a moment, and take a look at some of the growth prospects for some of these companies. Which sectors in particular do you think are going to perform well over the next, say, 12 to 18 months?
Right. So I think the Olympic stocks obviously are going to do very well. We're going to have construction. We're going to have rebuilding. Things around energy are going to be very important. Abe has verbally promised the world that he's going to fix the nuclear situation. So obviously there's going to be a lot of money and a lot of capital going into those sectors. Besides that, I would look at domestic demand. I would look at housing. And I would look again then at the exporters, who with a weaker yen now are being able to be much more competitive and take back some of that market share that they've lost over the past few years to the likes of their Korean competitors.
What about the CapEx component and the revisions to GDP? Do you think this is the start of an uptrend or a bit of a blip in the April to June quarter?
Absolutely. It's the start of an uptrend. As I've said on this program before, I think over the next 3 to 4 years, Japan has turned a corner. We've got the Bank of Japan doing revolutionary things, and we've got the Abe government promising a growth strategy. And you're right, we don't know all the details of the third arrow yet, and now we've got this wonderful fourth arrow. I think there's a fifth arrow coming through casinos being approved and built in Japan, and I think all of those things will lead to 3 or 4 years at least of above average economic growth in Japan.
Yeah, Glenn, we can feel your excitement and your sentiment even down the line from where you are in Tokyo. But one thing I don't understand is you've got three stocks as your favorites: Hajime Construction, Taisei, and Mitsui Fudosan. But in terms of valuation, they look rather pricey. Price to book about 2 times, one a little bit higher than 1.3, 2.3. Take us through why investors should get into these three picks now.
Well, you're looking at consensus valuations, Chloe, which are frankly quite backward-looking, and those valuations and those forecasts going forward didn't have this knowledge of the Olympics and didn't believe in the Abe plan going forward and so on and so forth. So I wouldn't necessarily consider today's valuations as the right way to look at these stocks over the next 3 to 4 years. Hajime is a very interesting story. It's a merger of 6 companies. It's going to put the company in a completely different class in terms of merits of scale and whatnot. It's going to jump into the likes of a Daito Trust or a Sekisui House class, which trade typically 15 times PE versus Hajime, which has been trading around 8 times PE. So I think it's a very interesting story and one that you should watch in terms of growth going forward.
Big picture, Glenn, is Japan also benefiting from the fact that everywhere else looks a little bit ho-hum? China looks a little bit ho-hum. You still have the European situation. You have the concerns about Fed tapering and the sort of the unwinding of the flows out of the emerging markets. In light of all that, is Japan benefiting because it's sort of a stable bet?
Absolutely, Kelly. You know, capital is searching a home. There's still excess capital globally, and equities have been an unloved class for a number of years. That capital is searching for a home, and now there's a lot of reasons to shift that capital into Japan, whether it's a weakening yen and the exporters doing better, or whether it's the Olympics coming, or whether it's hope that Japan's finally going to escape from deflation. There's a lot of reasons for that capital to be coming into Japan, and I would expect that trend to actually accelerate going forward. There's still a very large pool of global capital that's very skeptical about Japan and does not believe in this 3rd or 4th or 5th arrow, and I would expect that capital to start to flow in Japan over the next year to 18 months.
Yeah, but shouldn't investors be a little bit ho-hum also in light of the fact that they haven't got the Fukushima situation completely under control? Perhaps the fact that dollar-yen pair couldn't stick its neck above 100 yen for a long period of time could also be a little bit of skepticism on the part of investors.
That's right, Chloe. There are many reasons to be skeptical about Japan, but I think investors have focused on those negative factors for the past 20 years. And frankly, this turning of a corner is revolutionary for Japan. We're going to look back historically at this period in time and say, yes, Japan turned a corner. It might be for 5 or 6 years that we have an upturn, and then there might be some fiscal issues that need to be revisited. But for now, sentiment has changed. Japan has turned the corner. This is a new era.
You know, what you're saying almost sounds like that full-page ad that we saw on the Financial Times. Welcome to the New Japan by Shinzo Abe. I'm sure they'll be listening to what you said. Thanks so much. Good to talk to you. Glen Wood
Thanks,
from
Chloe.
Mitsubishi.
Thanks, Chloe.
USA Morgan
Good to see you again.
Stanley. Yeah, good to see you too. Well, have a fantastic afternoon over there in Tokyo.